Okay, so are we ready for this? A deep dive into Barack Obama, the man, the president, the legacy. And we're going straight to the source, his memoir, A Promised Land. I mean, talk about a time capsule.
It's more than just a highlight reel, right? You really get this sense of, wow, he's wrestling with some heavy stuff, trying to make sense of leadership when the stakes are sky high.
And he doesn't waste any time getting personal. That story about his mother asking him point blank if he wants to be the kind of person who inflicts pain or avoids it. Whoa, heavy stuff for a kid.
And it gets to the core of what she instilled in him, not just about being a good guy, but she was wary of these grand pronouncements, these rigid beliefs. She was about living your values, and for her, that meant challenging the status quo, marrying interracially twice, forging her own path.
Wow, okay, hold on. Are we seeing this as a direct link to Obama's views on social justice later on? Because that's huge. And so the idea that her experiences, her struggles, shaped his worldview.
It's there, woven throughout the book. He was raised by someone who bucked the system, and whether it's conscious or not, that had to leave its mark, especially as he encounters more and more of the world's inequalities.
And those encounters weren't just theoretical. He talks about living in Indonesia as a kid, seeing that stark gap between the haves and have-nots firsthand, not just reading about it in a textbook, but living it.
Exactly. Poverty is one thing on paper, another thing entirely when you see it every day, when it's your surroundings. And then in his observations of his own family, his grandparents, his mother, the limitations they faced, the dreams they held, it gets real personal real fast.
And yet, when he gets his first taste of politics, working on Congressman Rush's campaign, it's like this wave of disillusionment hits him. Almost like the system itself rewards a certain kind of compromise, and not the good kind.
Yeah, and he's honest about that, how he felt himself becoming what he'd always warned himself against the politician, more worried about strategy than real change. It's a turning point because it forces him to think, okay, how far am I willing to go to play the game?
Which, of course, leads to him running against, well, Rush himself for that very congressional seat. And, doesn't win. What I find interesting is he doesn't try to sugarcoat these losses, these setbacks. He owns them.
That self-awareness is huge, right? He's not this perfect politician from day one. He stumbles, he questions, he learns. And it's after this loss that we see him really lean into family life, the birth of his daughters. It's like a reset, a chance to refocus.
It's like he needed that grounding, that dose of everyday life to clarify his purpose, because he does eventually jump back into the political ring, this time running for the Illinois State Senate.
But it's different now, more strategic.
Ah.
He sees the redistricting process as this opportunity to affect real change for his constituents. It's not just idealism anymore, there's a plan.
And this time, success. He wins the election, but even more importantly, he catches the attention of this guy, David Axelrod, who becomes a key strategist. Although it sounds like Axelrod wasn't sold right away.
Axelrod, he was a pro, seen it all, and he had his doubts. Especially in that post-9/11 world, the political landscape was tense. He even questioned if Obama's normalcy, which could be seen as relatable, might actually hurt him in the long run.
What a dilemma, right? But then, 2004 rolls around, the Democratic National Convention, and bam! Obama delivers that keynote address that everyone's still talking about. Talk about a turning point.
That speech, it wasn't just well written, it had this raw energy to it. It launched him onto the national stage, and suddenly, he's not just an inspiring senator anymore, he's a contender.
It's like that speech was this rocket launch, right? And he's sort of holding on for dear life, building his Senate team. We're talking Pete Rouse, Robert Gibbs, John Favreau. But the whisperings are starting. Is he going to go for it, a presidential run?
And he's wrestling with that, you can tell. The energy is building, this chance for something big, but there's also his family to think about, his own doubts even. He admits he kind of brushed it off at first, all the hype.
Which makes the story of Michelle's involvement even more powerful, right? Because she was, well, hesitant doesn't quite cover it. I can't even imagine the weight of that decision, knowing what a presidential campaign does to a family.
She had every right to be concerned. The toll it takes, the scrutiny, their lives completely upended, her own career put on hold.
Yeah.
It wasn't until he talked about their shared faith, not just in, a higher power, but in the possibility of really changing things, that she came around.
Then comes the reality of campaigning, and whoa, boy. It's relentless, the travel, the fundraising, the constant media presence. It's exhausting just reading about it.
There's this great anecdote where Gibbs, his press secretary, actually tells him to smile more, project this happy warrior image. It's like a reminder that politics has this whole performance aspect to it,
All while navigating this incredibly complex web of race and identity in America. We talked about Axelrod's concerns about Obama's normalcy, right? Did that play into how he addressed these issues, being a black candidate on this massive stage?
Absolutely. There was no escaping it. Criticized for not being black enough, for not focusing solely on issues directly impacting the black community. But then when he did, more criticism. It's a tightrope walk few politicians ever have to manage.
Makes you realize there's no playbook for this, right? No way to make everyone happy, especially with something as charged as race. And then, of course, the Reverend Wright controversy hit.
Oh, man. Talk about your perfect storm. Personal loyalty crashing headfirst into political ambition. Here's Obama preaching unity, and then these sermons from his former pastor full of anger and resentment are all over the news.
And you can tell how deeply it affected him reading his words. It wasn't just about managing the crisis, it was about confronting this much larger reality of racial division in America. Did he even think he could bridge that gap, win over those who doubted him because of his race?
You can feel the doubt creeping in. I mean, it's one thing to deal with subtle biases, microaggressions, but he talks about straight-up racism on the campaign trail, people refusing to shake his hand, Confederate flags.
Which makes the story about his grandmother all the more poignant, I think. He talks about her growing up in Kansas during the Depression, facing discrimination as a woman in the workplace. It's like these stories, these histories, fueled his determination.
There's this quiet strength he seems to have inherited, you know? His grandmother faced down some tough times with grace and grit. You can see that same spirit in how he dealt with the pressure cooker of that campaign.
And he wins the nomination, against all odds. But then it's on to the general election against McCain, and wow, different ballgame entirely. The financial crisis hits, and suddenly it's not just about hope and change, it's about saving the country from economic collapse.
And his message is really put to the test. He's criticizing the lack of regulation, calling for government intervention. Not exactly a popular stance at the time, even with the economy in freefall.
Especially with McCain temporarily suspending his own campaign to focus on the crisis, even suggesting Obama do the same. Talk about a power move.
Brilliant, actually. Totally out of the box.
Huh?
But Obama saw that people needed to hear from both of them. So he stayed the course, kept his cool, and that probably reassured a lot of voters.
And it worked. He wins, becomes the first black president of the United States. But even as he's getting ready to step into the Oval Office, the weight of it all is setting in. He's getting briefed on just how bad the economy really is, meeting with President Bush.
It's this strange mix.
Right.
Excitement, but also this massive responsibility. You can only imagine what was going through his mind, knowing his decisions were going to impact millions of lives.
And some of those decisions, not easy ones. Asking Robert Gates to stay on as Secretary of Defense even though they disagreed on the Iraq War, that's bold, especially for someone who campaigned on change.
It showed he was willing to put experience and stability first, especially with everything else going on. And then there's the whole Hillary Clinton thing, appointing your former rival as Secretary of State. Talk about burying the hatchet.
That's the kind of move that makes you think, okay, maybe this guy really is serious about unity. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses on the home front, was it? Michelle had mixed feelings about moving into the White House.
Of course. She was giving up a lot. Her career, her privacy, their family life as they knew it. It's a good reminder that even the most supportive spouses, they make huge sacrifices when their partner reaches that level of power.
And then there's that little detail about Michelle's mother, Marion Robinson, moving into the White House to help with the girls. It's those little human moments that make you realize, hey, presidents, they've got family drama too.
Totally relatable.
Yeah.
But amidst all of that, the job waits for no one. He walks into the Oval Office facing a collapsing economy, 2 wars, the H1N1 pandemic.
The clock is ticking, right? His economic team, Gaithner, Summers, they're scrambling for solutions, but there's pushback everywhere. Republicans are wary of government intervention, and even some in his own party are hesitant.
It just highlights the immense pressure to deliver, especially when you're up against a crisis of that magnitude and facing opposition from all sides. And as if that wasn't enough, you've got the beer summit.
Oh man, that was something else. Henry Louis Gates Jr., a black Harvard professor, gets arrested in his own home, sparks this whole national conversation about race and law enforcement, and Obama's solution, a beer summit.
It was such an Obama move, right? Let's talk it out, find some common ground. Did it solve everything? No. But it showed he was willing to at least try to have a conversation about these tough issues.
And through it all, he's also trying to change the tone in Washington, calling for unity, civility, bipartisanship. Was that even possible, especially with the Tea Party movement gaining momentum?
$1 million question. You've got this populist wave fueled by anger and frustration, reshaping the Republican Party. Compromise, working together, that was getting harder and harder.
Which brings us to the 2010 midterm elections. Republicans take control of the House. It's a blow, a reminder that even the most popular presidents aren't invincible.
And it sets the stage for a brutal second term, with even more partisan fighting, every legislative victory, a battle royale.
Yeah, talk about a reality check. It's like that election threw a wrench in the whole yes we can thing. And meanwhile, the rest of the world's not exactly waiting for America to sort itself out.
Not a chance. And remember, Obama came in with this whole different vision for foreign policy, right?
Yeah.
Diplomacy first, trying to repair relationships, even engaging with adversaries. A big shift from the previous administration.
But he inherits two wars right off the bat. A nuclear-ambitious Iran, Putin's back in Russia, flexing his muscles, China's on the rise. You name it, the global headache file was waiting on his desk.
That's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? It's one thing to talk about ideals, another to put them into practice when you've got actual boots on the ground and these geopolitical chess matches happening.
And one of the first things he does is that speech in Cairo, reaching out to the Muslim world, calling for a new beginning. Did that resonate, given how strained things had become?
It was a bold move, no question. He was signaling a change, not just in policy, but in the whole tone of the conversation. Did it fix everything overnight? No. But it was a start, an attempt to rebuild some of that lost trust.
He really goes for it on nuclear nonproliferation, too. Wins the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009 for his efforts. That's huge, but it also puts a target on your back, right? You've got to deliver.
And that's the tough part. You've got countries like Iran and North Korea who see nuclear weapons as their security guarantee. Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks.
Then there's that meeting with Putin, who's already making it clear Russia's done playing nice. You get the feeling, even in that first encounter, that these two are headed for a showdown.
It was a clash of personalities, a whole worldviews. Obama, he's all about building consensus, appealing to reason. Putin, he's playing hardball, testing boundaries. And that dynamic, it keeps popping up throughout Obama's presidency.
And then you have China. Not an enemy, exactly, but definitely a competitor, and one that's gaining ground fast. How do you even begin to manage that relationship, knowing it's going to shape the entire 21st century?
It's a balancing act, that's for sure. You want to find ways to cooperate, right? Climate change, trade, global security. But you also have to address the concerns. Human rights, intellectual property, their military ambitions in the South China Sea. It's complicated.
Let's not forget about those wars he inherited either. Afghanistan especially seems like an impossible situation to solve. He increases troop levels, but he's also clear about wanting to end that war responsibly. Was that even realistic?
That was the million-dollar question. You've got military advisors saying you can't just pull out, not after all that's been sacrificed.
But then you've got people like Biden pushing for a more targeted approach, focusing on counterterrorism, knowing America can't keep fighting these forever wars. It's a lose-lose situation. And as if things weren't already intense enough, the Arab Spring kicks off in 2011. Protests, uprisings, the whole Middle East is a powder keg.
Can you imagine trying to lead a country while an entire region is undergoing this massive upheaval? Do you back the dictators Americans have been allied with for decades? Or do you side with the people demanding democracy, knowing it could easily backfire? There are no easy answers.
And then, of course, there's the raid that takes out Osama bin Laden. Huge victory, right? Proof that American intelligence and military might could still get the job done. But even that, it wasn't simple, was it?
No, it really shows Obama's capacity for making those tough calls, weighing the risks, the potential consequences. In the end, he decides that the chance for justice, for holding a mass murderer accountable, it outweighed those risks.
It's easy to forget with all these world-changing events swirling around that he's also trying to be a husband, a father. He talks about having dinner with Michelle and the girls almost every night, no matter what.
It's grounding, I think. That reminder that even in the middle of all the chaos, there's still family, that need for connection and normalcy.
So we come to the end of our deep dive into a promised land. And wow, what a journey. Obama faced challenges that would test anyone on every level. Personal, political, global.
And while there were some incredible achievements, there were also compromises, setbacks, those constant tough choices that impacted so many lives. It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. It's ambition and idealism smashing headfirst into the reality of power. What gets me is he doesn't shy away from the tough stuff, admits his mistakes, his doubts, leaves you with this feeling that real leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about wrestling with the questions.
That's such an important message, especially these days, right? When everyone wants simple solutions, easy answers. Obama reminds us that the truth is usually messy, complicated. And that's okay.
It really makes you think, if you were in his shoes, facing those same impossible choices, what would you have done differently? It's a question that stays with you long after you finish the book. What a glimpse into the mind of a president grappling with history in the making.